I still remember the exact moment everything fell apart, and how that moment would eventually become the fuel for the biggest comeback of my life. Back then, I worked at Titan Tech, a large software firm where everyone walked around like they were auditioning for some corporate movie. I was just a junior analyst, fresh out of college, drowning in student loans and juggling bills to support my mother, who had been battling health issues for years. Every penny mattered to me. I packed homemade lunches, took the bus instead of taxis, and wore the same 2 pairs of formal shoes for almost a year. And yet, I wasn't ashamed, because I believed hard work would eventually pay off. But apparently, that belief was laughable to the people around me, most of all to Mia. She wasn't just a coworker, she was my girlfriend. We had met during training, bonded over long coding sessions, late-night project deadlines, and the kind of hopes you only share when you're young and optimistic. I thought we were building a life together. But the moment things became financially tight, her attitude changed in a way I couldn't have imagined. The breaking point came in the office cafeteria on a Monday. Funny how life-changing moments never give a dramatic warning. I had just sat down with my cheap vending machine sandwich, the one I bought because I needed to save money for my mom's medicines that week. Mia walked in with her new group of friends, the fashionable marketing team, who could spend more on lunch than I spent on groceries in a week. She looked at my meal, then at me, and laughed. "Ethan, you really still eat those?" she said loudly, making sure everyone around heard. "No wonder you're stuck in the same position. Maybe if you lived a little, you'd actually get somewhere." Her friends laughed, but Liam laughed the loudest. Liam, tall, polished, senior manager, corporate charmer, BMW key on the table just so everyone had to notice. I felt something inside me crack, but I stayed quiet. I didn't want to embarrass her or myself. After all, this was the woman who once said she loved me. But love, as I learned that day, becomes cheap when someone starts craving luxury. Within 2 weeks, she dumped me. Her reason? I need someone who matches my ambition. Not love, not loyalty, ambition. And in her dictionary, ambition meant money. The rumor spread through the office like wildfire. Mia left Ethan for Liam because Ethan is broke. I became a joke, a punchline. The awkward look people gave me when I entered the room burned more than their words. Then came the final blow. HR emailed me to come in for a performance meeting. I walked into a glass-walled room, the city skyline behind them like some cruel painting of what success looked like. Liam sat beside my manager with a smug expression that said everything without saying a word. They gave me the standard corporate line, "We've reviewed your work and we don't think you're the right fit for the company moving forward." No warnings, no second chance, just a clean cut. As I walked out of the building carrying a cardboard box with my laptop and a few personal items, I looked back at that massive logo, Titan Tech, shining like a monument of power. It wasn't just a company. It was the place where I had been humiliated, betrayed, and discarded. Mia and Liam stood near the entrance, laughing about something. Maybe me, maybe not. But in that moment, I made myself a promise so deep that I felt it in my bones. I will come back to this place, not as an employee, but as the man they will regret underestimating. I didn't know how yet. I had no plan, no money, no opportunities waiting. But I had something they didn't, the hunger to rewrite the story.
Losing that job was like having the ground ripped out from under me. I walked home that evening in the rain, every step heavy, every breath tighter than the last, because the humiliation didn't end at the office door. I had to go home and tell my mother. She sat on the worn-out couch, wrapped in a shawl, even though it was warm inside, her breathing weak, but her eyes always gentle. When I told her I was fired, she looked hurt, not because of the job, but because she knew how hard I had worked to keep us afloat. I told her I would be fine, that something better was coming, But the truth was my savings were nearly gone, and the rent was due in 2 weeks. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every laugh, every comment, every smirk from Mia and Liam, and it felt like fire spreading through my chest. I wasn't angry at the world. I was angry at myself, forever depending on the validation of people who would step over me the moment I wasn't useful. The next morning, I began applying for jobs, sending out resumes to anyone who would listen. For weeks, nothing. Silence. And every time I passed that office building on my way to the bus stop, I had to fight the urge to look up at the windows and imagine them laughing. Eventually, I realized waiting for another company to accept me was the same cage I had just escaped from. I didn't want to be at the mercy of people like Liam ever again. So I started studying. I spent hours in the public library because I couldn't afford high-speed Wi-Fi at home anymore. I read everything: business management, finance strategy, corporate efficiency, startup case studies. I watched lectures and courses online, sometimes sitting there until the library closed. I didn't have money, but I had time, and I used every second of it. I started building a small tool on my laptop, an AI-based optimization system that could analyze workflow patterns inside companies and show where they were losing time and money. It wasn't some revolutionary idea, but I understood inefficiency better than anyone because I had lived inside a failing system. I coded during the day and took a night shift job unloading stock in a warehouse just to keep the lights on. My hands blistered, my back ached. I'd come home exhausted, but the moment I sat at my laptop, the exhaustion disappeared. I wasn't working for survival anymore. I was building my future. After 6 months, I had a working prototype. I named it Opticore. Now I faced the next problem. No one knew who I was, and no one bets on a nobody. I applied to startup incubators, but most rejected me on site. I didn't have polished presentation slides or fancy credentials. But one investor, Mr. Patel, an older man with sharp eyes and a quiet voice, watched my demo longer than the others. When the others dismissed me, he said, "Come see me tomorrow." His office was small and old-fashioned, the kind with real wooden shelves and no flashy tech. He listened to my entire pitch without interruption. Then he leaned back and said, "You're hungry. People who have lost everything are more dangerous than those who have always had something. I will invest, but you work and you learn. No ego." I shook his hand with both hands. That handshake became the turning point of my life. With his investment, I hired 2 developers, friends from college who believed in me when nobody else did. We worked out of my apartment, sleeping in shifts, eating cheap meals, building a product that could actually change companies from the inside. Every line of code, every design decision, every late-night problem-solving session was fueled by the memory of Mia's laugh and Liam's smirk. I wasn't trying to get even. Not yet. I was building the version of myself that would make their entire world regret ever looking down on me. And for the first time in my life, I felt something stronger than anger. Purpose.
2 years passed, and those 2 years transformed me in ways I didn't even recognize when I looked in the mirror. Opticore didn't just survive, it grew. We moved from my cramped apartment to a small rented office, then to an entire floor in a new tech hub downtown with glass walls and our logo glowing like a promise no one could ignore. Our client list expanded from local suppliers to national retail chains, healthcare networks, and eventually international logistics firms. The more we grew, the more I found myself stepping into rooms where people actually listened to me. CEOs, investors, board members, men and women who once would have overlooked me now leaned forward when I spoke. And even though life was finally turning into something stable and successful, I hadn't forgotten. Not the cafeteria laughter, not the breakup speech disguised as ambition, not the smug look in Liam's eyes the day he fired me. Those memories lived inside me, not as pain anymore, but as fuel. One morning, as I was reviewing quarterly gains, my operations manager rushed in with a look that said she'd found something interesting. "Ethan, look at this." She handed me an industry report. Titan Tech, the very company that tossed me out, was struggling. Their productivity was dropping, their investors were losing confidence, departments were chaotic, employees were leaving, and the reason?
Inefficiency. The exact problem OptiCore was built to solve. I stared at the report for a long time, and a slow, cold smile stretched across my face. Fate didn't just bring an opportunity. It delivered it to my door gift-wrapped. A few weeks later, I received an email from Titan Tech's procurement department. They wanted to schedule a meeting. They needed a solution fast. They needed my software. The irony tasted sweeter than anything money could buy. I scheduled the meeting for Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. The exact time and day they fired me 2 years earlier. I walked into the building wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, polished shoes, and confidence I earned the hard way. The receptionist didn't recognize me, but the moment I stepped into the conference room, silence spread like a shadow. Mia was there. Her once perfect smile looked forced, her eyes uncertain. She was now the marketing director, which explained a lot. Liam sat at the table too, though his posture was different now, less confident, more desperate. His hairline had thinned and stress had softened his jawline. Interesting how pressure changes people. "Ethan?" Mia whispered, her voice cracking just slightly. "You look different." I pulled out a chair, took my time, and replied calmly, "Success will do that. No emotion, no malice, just truth." The presentation started. I explained how OptiCore could reduce their operational losses by up to 18%, streamline communication, and restructure failing departments. I watched them absorb every word like people drowning taking in air. Liam kept trying to interrupt with questions to reassert his dominance, but every answer I gave shut him down neatly, professionally, surgically. I wasn't there to humiliate him, not yet. I was there to show them they needed me. And they did. When the meeting ended, the board member stepped out to discuss. The moment the door closed, Mia stepped toward me, voice softer, almost fragile. "Ethan, can we talk? Just us?" I didn't even look at her when I replied, "No. We're not in the same story anymore." Her face fell, and for the first time I saw regret. Not because she missed me, but because the life she bet on was collapsing. Then the board returned. Their spokesperson extended his hand. "We'd like to move forward at your proposed pricing." I shook his hand slowly, deliberately. The contract would not just make OptiCore one of the most influential efficiency firms in the region. It would give me direct access to Titan Tech's internal structure. I walked out of that building as the solution to their survival. They didn't know it yet, but I wasn't there to save them. I was there to take back everything they stole, and then take more.
The weeks after signing the contract felt like stepping onto a chessboard where every piece moved because I whispered a strategy into its ear. OptiCore's team tunneled into Titan Tech's systems the way a surgeon isolates an organ, methodically, carefully, with spreadsheets and telemetry instead of scalpels. We found what I already suspected: duplicated workflows, ghost projects that had sucked budgets dry, an entire middle management layer that existed to justify itself rather than to deliver results. Each discovery was another nail in the coffin of their arrogance. I presented the early diagnostics to Titan Tech's board with the precise tone of a man holding the exact map to their bleeding. "Fix this," I said, "and you'll be stable. Ignore it, and you'll keep hemorrhaging cash." They clung to me like drowning men to a lifeline. Behind the scenes, though, I wasn't content with being their consultant. Being the solution only put me back under their thumb. I wanted leverage, permanence, and the quiet satisfaction of watching the people who laughed at me answer to me. So I started playing a longer game. With Mr. Patel and a group of venture partners who had quietly bought into our growth story, I arranged a meeting with a neutral investor consortium that specialized in corporate turnarounds. I walked into that meeting with Titan Tech's diagnostics in my pocket and a clear proposition. We would lead a structured buy-in that would stabilize their operations, but it would come at a price: equity for OptiCore and a seat at the board. They had no choice. Their cash reserves were dwindling, and the executives who had promised results were now on borrowed time. The negotiation was clinical. I gave them options that looked generous on paper but shifted the center of gravity in our favor: performance-based milestones, escrowed payouts, and a clause that allowed OptiCore to convert consultancy fees into equity if certain KPIs weren't met. Liam argued and stammered. Mia tried to charm the board by insisting they could fix morale without giving away control. It was almost comic how predictable they were. So used to operating from a position of assumed power, they forgot how fragile that power actually was. The board voted, grudgingly, to accept the deal. When the conversion clause triggered just 3 months later, after our optimizations cut operational loss significantly, but the management still failed to stop internal waste, Opticore exercised the equity conversion. Overnight, our stake ballooned. I found myself with a seat at the table I had once been kicked out of, and the look on Liam's face when they handed me the badge for Interim Operations Director was something I had replayed in my head 1,000 times. But I didn't gloat publicly. Revenge that screams loses its teeth. Instead, I set about restructuring with clinical efficiency. I reorganized departments, replaced redundant managers with data-driven leaders, and implemented transparent performance metrics that made excuses impossible. People who had thrived on ambiguity found themselves exposed. Liam's fear of influence contracted like a receding tide. He lashed out, trying to rally old allies and leak stories to the press about aggressive takeover tactics until his credibility cracked under the weight of his own mismanagement. Mia begged for private meetings, asking for small concessions and pleading that she hadn't meant to hurt me. I listened once, then let her words flow into the same drawer where I kept memories, archived, inert. As Opticore's changes produced measurable profit, investor confidence returned and Titan Tech's valuation stabilized. But something else shifted too. Respect, albeit grudging, moved toward me. I used that respect to negotiate a full acquisition within 12 months. The final deal was elegant and merciful in its own way. Titan Tech sold a controlling interest to our investor consortium, and the original founders accepted exit packages that were generous enough to keep lawsuits at bay, but stingy enough to leave them wondering where their prestige had gone. Liam was offered a buyout and a non-compete. He took it, humiliated, but with his pride intact enough to refuse help. Mia resigned quietly with a letter that thanked the company for opportunities and wished everyone well. She left without a public fight, the way people leave when they know the audience no longer cares. Standing in the boardroom as the papers were signed, I felt none of the triumph I had imagined. The moment wasn't cathartic in a cinematic way, it was simply right. I had clawed my way from a cardboard box to a board membership with blood and sleepless nights and stubborn faith. The last thing I did before the press release was walk past the old cafeteria on my way out, pause where I had eaten that vending sandwich years ago, and for a heartbeat, touch the table with one finger. No cheers, no vindictive speeches, just the quiet satisfaction that I had rewritten the ending on my terms.
Owning the company didn't mean the story was finished. It only meant the stage was finally mine. After the acquisition, I spent the next year transforming Titan Tech into a place that functioned on merit, not ego. People who contributed stayed and thrived, and those who had built their careers on manipulation, politics, and appearances found themselves irrelevant. The corporate halls that once echoed with dismissive laughter now held quiet, focused determination. I became known not just as the CEO, but as the man who turned a sinking ship into a streamlined engine. But success is never clean. Whispers began circulating about Mia and Liam, as if the universe wasn't done showing me how deeply the rot went. I heard through industry conversations that Liam had tried to start his own consultancy firm, using contacts he assumed would follow him out of loyalty. But it turned out loyalty was another illusion he had believed in, just like I once had. No one wanted to align with someone whose legacy was synonymous with failure and ego-driven decisions. His firm collapsed in 6 months, and he quietly left the industry entirely. Mia, however, was a different story. One evening, while reviewing quarterly reports, my secretary informed me someone was waiting in the lobby asking for me. When she said the name, I already knew why she was there. I found her standing near the same entrance where she once laughed behind my back. She looked different, not just older, but tired, like life had chipped away at the edges she once sharpened for others. She approached with careful steps as if afraid the floor might reject her. "Ethan," she began, her voice soft and breaking in places. "I know I'm the last person you want to see, but I needed to say something." I didn't speak. I wanted her to say whatever her heart had left. She took a breath.
I was wrong. About everything. I thought success was money, status, image. I thought happiness was something you could wear and show. But I see now that it's something you build. And you built yours. I didn't come here to ask for anything. I just needed to tell you that I regret how I treated you. For a moment, the cafeteria scene flickered back. The laughter, the embarrassment, the sting of being small in her eyes. But I wasn't that man anymore. I nodded once and replied quietly, I know you did what you thought was best for the person you were then, but we're not the same people anymore. And that's okay. She swallowed hard, her eyes glassy. You look happy, she whispered. I smiled, not to prove anything, but because it was simply true. I am. She nodded, understanding that there was no door to reopen, no version of the story where we found our way back. And then she walked away. No theatrics, no pleas, just the inevitable ending to a chapter long overdue for closure. After she left, I stood in the lobby alone, watching people pass through the space that had once felt like a battlefield. Now it was just an office, just another building, just a place. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't realized until then. The revenge was never about crushing them. It was about becoming someone I could be proud of, someone who didn't need validation, someone whose worth came from perseverance, not permission. I went home that night not to celebrate, not to brood, but to sit beside my mother, who was healthier now, laughing at a cooking show and asking me if I wanted tea. I realized everything I had done, the sleepless nights, the struggle, the fire inside me, was never actually about them. It was about us. And in that quiet living room with the warm light spilling across the floor, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace.
Peace is a strange thing. It doesn't arrive with applause or fireworks. It settles quietly, like dust after a long storm. And only then do you realize how much chaos you had learned to live with. Months passed after seeing Mia, and life found a rhythm that felt almost unfamiliar. I woke up early, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I spent mornings having coffee with my mother, who was healthier and more vibrant now that medication and care were no longer financial battles. I spent afternoons in the office mentoring younger employees who reminded me of who I used to be. Hungry, determined, unsure. I wasn't shaping a company anymore. I was shaping people. And that mattered more than any number on a quarterly report. But life, of course, is never a straight line. One day, I received an invitation, a high-profile business summit where CEOs from top companies around the country were gathering for networking and partnerships. Titan Tech, under my leadership, had finally been recognized as one of the fastest-growing turnaround success stories. I attended out of respect for the work everyone had put in, not to prove anything. But when I arrived, I saw someone I did not expect. Liam. He was standing near a corner of the ballroom, not dressed in a tailored suit anymore, but something slightly worn, slightly humble. Not broken, not ruined, just changed. He saw me too, and for a moment we stood there, two men who had once been rivals, enemies, symbols of each other's failures and victories. Then he walked over. No arrogance, no forced confidence, just quiet acceptance. Ethan, he said, his voice lower, steadier than before. I needed to say something. I know I can't undo what happened. I know I played a part in pushing you out. I convinced myself it was just business, just competition. But it wasn't. It was insecurity. I saw you growing, and I was afraid. His honesty took the air out of my lungs, not because it hurt, but because it was real. He continued, you didn't just win. You earned it, and I needed to come to terms with that. I looked at him for a long moment, not the man who smirked when I fell, just a man who had faced his own collapse. I don't hate you, Liam, I said finally, and I meant it. If anything, you were part of the reason I became who I am. So, thank you. He exhaled, And for a moment, we were just two human beings who had finally laid down a war. No victory speech, no dramatic ending, just closure. The kind that repairs something inside you that you didn't realize was still cracked. After the event, I walked out into the evening air, the city lights flickering like constellations on the ground instead of the sky. I stood there, hands in my pockets, watching people move, busy, tired, hopeful, lost, determined, all just trying to become versions of themselves they could live with. And I realized something. Revenge had brought me here, yes. The hunger to prove myself had carried me when nothing else could. But in the end, the real story wasn't about Mia or Liam or Titan Tech, or even the humiliation. The real story was that I never stayed small. I never let the world's laughter become my truth. I didn't destroy them. I outgrew them. And that is the kind of victory that lasts. When I went home that night, my mother was sitting on the balcony, watching the sky. I sat beside her. We didn't talk. We didn't need to. The quiet said everything. We made it. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I refused to remain the person I was when they laughed. And that, more than anything, is what it means to truly win.